Before you start listening, please be aware that this episode includes discussion of content with violence against children and addiction. If that's not for you, see you next time. Hello and welcome to this episode of Fiction Fans, a podcast where we read books and other words too. I'm Lily.
And I'm Sarah, and we are so thrilled to have our first repeat guest, the wonderful Krystle Matar, with us to talk about Legacy of the Brightwash.
I am very excited to be here again. It's not getting boring yet.
Oh, good.
I don't think it ever will. That was mean.
I was going to say, you're practically our third host by now.
Yeah.
You've been in as many episodes as I have.
I'm game. I'm here for it. I can't read as fast as you guys, though.
Krystle, what do you do when we're not bogarting all of your free time?
I write.
Yeah. Books like Legacy of the Brightwash, perhaps?
Yeah, right. Yeah, I spend a lot of my free time just like scribbling in a notebook, thinking up random characters' backstories, which answers the question, I think, how come the characters are all so big? It's because I can't help but figure out when they were born and what their zodiac sign is, and how many siblings they have. And I've been spending all day doing a character today that comes up in Legacy of Brick and Bone, because he's going to get a short story soon.
Ooh.
And a novel. So yeah, that's what I do. I do this. Also, there's family or something. And
oh yeah, that.
Yeah. All the other people that live in this house.
Writing is way more important.
Yeah. There's the people in my head, and then there's the people in my house, and it's kind of a toss-up who takes more attention.
Well, before we get too involved in our Legacy of the Brightwash conversation, let's ease into this a little bit with something great that happened this week.
I went backpacking with my father for 4 days, and that was delightful.
That's awesome.
I really enjoyed it.
Where'd you guys go? The Sierras?
Yeah, we went to the Sierra.
Very cool.
The pictures were awesome.
Thank you. It's such lovely country there. Like, it's really gorgeous.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't lie. I'm a little jealous. That looked awesome. I guess my good thing is that I'm here again. This is pretty exciting. I like
Hey.
You flatterer.
Well, I mean, after I said the rude thing about it not being boring, gotta suck up a little.
I found $20 in my pocket today.
Oh,
Woo.
nice.
Yeah, that's it. That's not a story. But hey, random $20 bill. Awesome.
Yeah, take it.
Yeah. Now, this is the question that I'm sure everyone's been waiting for. What are we all drinking today?
Sarah, I think you should go first. You should lead the whiskey helm.
Okay. Well, in honor of Krystle being on and the distillery that features in Legacy of the Brightwash, I am drinking Bruichladdich Port Charlotte Heavily Peated, which I bought specifically for this recording.
I'm also drinking Bruichladdich. I have to admit, Sarah and I coordinated this effort.
We did.
I'm drinking the classic laddie. It is unpeated, but it is also very good. And I also bought a bottle because I didn't have enough left for a full dram. So I went to the store and bought a couple of bottles of whiskey.
As you should.
Obviously. Gotta fill out the shelf.
Well, I'm drinking bourbon because that's the type of whiskey I enjoy.
That's still whiskey. It still counts.
But in honor of Tashue, the main character in The Legacy of the Brightwash, he has his, favorite nostalgic, expensive whiskey, for which I am drinking Basil Hayden's, which is about as expensive as I get. But he shoots cheap whiskey. And so, in honor of Tashue, I'm going to start this podcast off with some wild turkey and chase it with sourdough bread because that's what I had in the house.
You didn't even shudder. Good for you. You make such a big deal about how you can't drink whiskey, but that was good. That was professional.
I can drink bourbon.
Fair.
I'm now going to chew into the microphone for a minute. I'm sorry, everyone.
So Sarah should talk about what she's reading then, so that it gives you time to eat.
There we go.
Our recording schedule is kind of timey-wimey. So the episode that comes out after this is released, you will hear me talk about how I have started reading Creation by Bjorn Larson. And in this episode, I'm going to talk about how I finished reading Creation by Bjorn Larson. I finished it while I was backpacking, and it was a very good vacation read. And I think that it's coming out on the day that this episode is released.
Woo!
August 18th.
Happy release day, Bjorn.
Yeah. So if you are listening, you should go and buy it.
Yeah,
it's very good.
For everyone who doesn't hear the first part, it does sound excellent, and I can't wait to read it myself. Can you give me like a
quick...
You're not the summary one, but try.
I'm not the summary one, but it is a retelling of Norse creation mythology, basically, but it's very funny. It's like Terry Pratchett, and I think I say this in the next episode as well.
I know, but if this one's coming out when it comes out, you got to give them something.
I know. I'm just explaining for people who might listen to the next episode that this is going to be a repeat, or what you hear then is going to be a repeat. But it's like if Terry Pratchett wrote Neil Gaiman's book on Norse mythology.
Bjorn will be very happy to hear it described that way. I'm gonna tell him.
It's wonderful, and I loved it. And he was very sweet in giving us an arc.
Oh, wait, do I have access to that?
You do have access to that.
Cool. Krystle, have you read anything good lately?
I probably should have prepared an answer. Oh, you know what I finished? It's called Coronado. It's a book of short stories by Dennis Lehane, who's my favorite mystery thriller type author. And the first story and the last story in that collection absolutely wrecked me. I was traumatized, but in that really awesome way. So that kind of re-energized me a bit about how, just a reminder of the books that I read 15 years ago that really fired me up and made me want to do this professionally. So that was a really good creativity refill for me, reading his absolute train wreck trauma of a short story. It's dark, but it's so good. It hurts so good. So that's what I just finished reading.
I feel like there's two kinds of inspirational reads. There are, like you said, I love this and I want to do this. And then there is, oh, I could do this better.
Yeah.
So this was the former. I
don't have a lot of the others just because if I'm not loving it, I just put it aside. This life's too short for me. I don't have enough brain cells to stick to a book that I'm not loving. Mm-hmm. So I couldn't tell you what I don't like. What I do like, however, I can talk about it forever. So, but that's just me. I really admire people who can stick to it and give it a chance and kind of see it out, and people who can look past what they didn't like and say what they did like. I think that takes good character. I admire that in people, but I'm not that good.
Well, it also depends on how long it is, right?
Yeah.
Sticking out a 200-page book is not a problem.
Yeah.
Sticking out a 700-page book is a very different undertaking.
Yeah, that's fair.
I have been rereading Oglaff, which is a webcomic strip.
Oh.
Yeah. You either know what it is or you don't.
Yeah.
No one go Google it unless you listen to my disclaimer, because it is filthy, explicit.
And delightful.
Sex jokes. Yeah. It's really funny.
Somehow I'm not at all surprised that we both know what it is.
I was trying to figure out how to describe it because I was like, I can't just say that with no context. But how do you describe it? I don't even know.
Yeah, it's fantastic filth is what it is, and I love it.
There's a lot of I would say there's a lot of dick jokes, but it's not that one, like, it's not that narrow-minded.
Yeah.
But it's the vibe of dick jokes.
Yeah.
More liberally applied. So it's just really, I mean, they're just comic strips, right? So it's short, funny, completely delightful. Sarah, I think we're skipping your Wheel of Time check-in, but you know what book we are going to talk about today?
Uh-oh.
Can you guess?
Oh, I don't know. I hear you guys read it really fast.
I finished reading it. Well, okay, technically I've already read it. Well, there's no technically about it. I had already read it.
Yeah.
But I wanted to reread it for this episode. And I finished reading it at about 12:10 today.
So roughly an hour before we started recording.
Yes.
I feel bad, but I don't know what I have no culpability here. But and that's a lot of book for you guys to create.
Actually, so I started it on Monday or Tuesday, and it's Saturday now.
I started it on Tuesday.
It only took me so long because, life stuff and having a job and all of that garbage.
That's rude.
It is rude.
It's so rude.
Because when I actually had the chance to sit down with it, I flew through that thing.
It goes surprisingly quickly. I remember my first time reading it. I
remember you finished it by accident.
Yeah, I finished it by accident.
You had several hundred pages left.
I don't know if I had several hundred, but I had at least 100. And then the next time I looked, I only had 11 pages left. And I was like, oh, well, I might as well finish it.
I'm pretty sure when you said you had however many pages left, you were on Lorne's big fight. That was the chapter that you were going to open into. And I remember thinking, uh-oh. And then when I woke up the next morning, you had finished. And it's like, yeah, that stressful stretch.
Yeah, I just, you just can't stop reading it. It's very compelling.
There's a lot going on in this book. It doesn't feel like 700 pages. For context, in case anyone listening hasn't read it, I guess that there's a chance of that. This book is, I'm going to say, framed with a mystery.
Yeah.
That is sort of the main thrust of the plot. But then there is, of course, all of the other things going on around it and through it, and the other characters' plot lines and everything sort of woven through that. But it starts with the main character, Toshue, who is a sort of enforcement officer for people with magic called Tainted. And I know poor Krystle has to listen to me summarize her 700-page book in 30 seconds.
Oh, it's good. It's good.
He is present when a dead child is found. And no one else really seems to be as concerned about this as him, which rubs him the wrong way. Understandably.
It does. Yeah. He can be quite prickly, so it doesn't take much to rub him the wrong way.
But dead children is, I think, a fair one.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he sort of goes off on this extracurricular investigation and learns some things about his government and his life that he did not know before. And I'm just going to say that.
Yeah, that's fair. That's not spoilery. That's good. That's a good summary.
There is magic in this book. The people who use it are called either tainted or talented, depending on who you're talking to.
Yeah.
And that's also right. They're pretty exploited by society. They have some pretty crummy jobs and are not treated very well. And they all are assigned these enforcement officers, which Toshue is, quote unquote, one of the good ones. I only say that because when I started reading this book, Krystle, one of my first notes was, "Oh, I'm expected to sympathize with the cop, and this is going to be rough." But it's okay. I came around.
Yeah, I knew what I was doing. I made that choice on purpose. So sorry, not sorry.
No, it worked. But that was exactly the sort of emotional roller coaster I went through in the first quarter of the book. Oh, and then I read the back and realized that was the whole point. And I was like, oh.
Oh, so you read the back before or after you'd already started?
Yes.
That's interesting. Yeah, see, I hardly ever even if I read the back of a book, there's something about the way that information is presented that I can't actually retain it. Mm-hmm. And only after I've read the book can I read the back and go, yeah, that's what happens. Or no, that's not what happens. So yeah, I feel you anyway.
But having that context of knowing his sort of disillusionment with his career is one of the main points, made it much easier to go on that journey with him.
That's good to know.
Yeah. I mean, it was right there. If I had picked this book up and not already known I was going to read it, I would have read the back of the book and known that was going on. But if I already know I'm going to read something, I'm like, what's the point?
You don't bother. Yeah, that's fair.
Yes. So Connor Kaplan, that's at the CM Kaplan. Connor is a wonderful person, and you should listen to our episode with him discussing his book and then go and buy his book if you haven't already. But he suggested that we solicit questions for Krystle from Twitter. So we did.
How much curating went into this? Is this just everything anyone asked, or did you sort of filter it out?
This is everything that we saw in time. If there are any more now, I don't know. But
yeah, I think it's basically everything.
Yeah.
There wasn't a whole lot of curation going on.
Sounds great.
Everyone's allowed in.
So starting off with a question from Benjamin, that's at Literature and Lo-Fi, for all of us. He asked, if you had to compare yourself to one character from a fantasy novel, who would it be and why? And I'm going to narrow the scope a little bit and say we should specifically talk about who we would compare ourselves to in Brightwash, since that's the book that we're here to discuss.
And also way easier. Yeah.
Ooh, I was panicking a little.
Part of that is just I have no answer.
Yeah.
if it's all a fantasy.
Yeah. It's too big a pond.
Mm-hmm.
I'll let one of you guys go first because my answer is going to be long.
Okay, near the end of the book, I'm going to be vague because the scene itself would be a spoiler, but I don't need to go into the whole thing to explain who Tam is.
Oh, Tam!
He is me.
Yeah.
At one point, one of the other characters is being led into a situation that everyone knows is not going to end great.
I'm coming and I'm bringing my gun.
Yeah, he insists on coming. He insists on bringing his gun, and he's trying to heal this character, even though he doesn't actually know what he's doing, because he's going to try. And that is me. Do I necessarily have the ability to help? No, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Hold still now. I'm not very good at this. Well, I really like Tam. That makes my heart really happy that somebody has picked him out of the very large crowd.
Tam is wonderful.
Yeah, he's fun. I gotta remember to get him into the next one.
You do. I think my answer is Kipler, who is a young civilian, essentially like patrolman, who is shot very early on, but you don't see his death on screen. So my headcanon is that he's not dead.
But that's not why he is you, right? Because you haven't been shot off screen.
Yeah.
Or otherwise.
I have not been shot off screen, but I think that he's me because he's kind of in the background and just trying his best, and he listens to Toshue when Toshue is looking for help in figuring out what's going on with these poor dead kids washing up. And even though he's not necessarily very effective and potentially dead quite quickly, he's doing his best, and I'm doing my best. So that's why I think that that's who I would be in Brightwash.
He's a really sweet character. My husband is laughing at one of us. I'm not sure who.
Probably all of us together.
Yeah.
Probably all of us, yeah.
Yeah. You guys picked really good ones. So my really complicated answer is that I identify really strongly with everyone in the core family. Now, family is a loose term. It's not everyone related by blood, but Toshue would be kind of representation of myself with a lot of if onlys attached. So if only I was stronger of a personality, if only. So he's always been kind of my alter ego, doing more than I generally feel like I could do. So I love him for that. Who else? Jason is kind of the embodiment of my frustration at the way I was raised. So he's kind of an angry guy, but I love him.
It's not like he doesn't have a reason to be angry.
Yeah, I think he's pretty understandably angry.
Yeah, he's faced a lot. And then Stella would be the embodiment of myself as a mother, kind of trying to figure everything out in the world in a pretty crazy world. And then Ishmael is the embodiment of all the hungry parts of me that grew up really frustrated. I think that's it. Yeah, I'll say that's it. So that core family is kind of, I put all the most important pieces of me in each of them and kind of splinter them through the story. So yeah, my long answer.
I'm going to do like a quick one sentence background for each of those characters. For anyone listening who hasn't read the book, we're in the non-spoiler section. This is where they should be.
Yeah, you're right.
Toshue, as I mentioned, is, I'm going to say, the main character. It's somewhat of an ensemble cast, but I think he definitely carries the story. Yeah,
this one is his story. This is his arc. So yeah, I would say he's the main character.
And he's the one trying to solve this mystery, or at least the one that we're following. Stella is his neighbor, and she has a young daughter. And as you mentioned, they are doing their best in this crazy world.
Yeah.
And Jason is Tashue's son, who has been imprisoned for not following the rules that Tainted are supposed to follow. And that sucks a lot.
Yeah. It's not a happy place where he's at. He's not doing good.
Now, are you telling me a government that labels people as tainted isn't fair to them? What?
Well, no.
What a concept.
Yeah.
I don't want to be too hard on Tashue because I did come around.
Are you not going to
pretty
explain
early
who
in the book?
Are you not going to explain who Ishmael is first?
I think your explanation of him was who Ishmael is.
I bet Sarah's gonna have some great things to say, so we should save it for when she's got to draw her parallels. Looking forward to that.
I joked that on Twitter that I had a whole speech prepared about the parallels between me and Ishmael, but I don't actually have a speech prepared. So you are calling my bluff.
You just lied on the internet?
No one has ever
Nobody does that. Ishmael's a hot mess. For anyone who hasn't read the book, Ishmael's a hot mess, but he's a delightful hot mess.
Ishmael is a hot mess, and he is the son of a watchmaker, and my stepfather repairs clocks. So I feel a lot of kinship towards him for that very fact.
Basically the same.
That was about the extent of our parallel.
Yeah, that's fair. There's your speech. You followed through on your promise.
I don't remember what I was going to say about Tashue.
I'm sorry, Lily.
It's okay.
Oh no. Oh yeah, you're probably mad that he let Jason go to jail.
No,
No?
I mean, I understood that, and I think he beat himself up enough for the both of us. That's fine. I mean, his arc was discovering that his career was maybe not great. Being someone who is enforcing the rules on these people who have magical powers. But his beginning, like, blind trust in the system, it was a little like, you're an adult. You can believe that they are well-intentioned, but still understand that they can make mistakes. Like, that felt a little, but I think it was to contrast. I assume it was to contrast where he ends up. So I was like, okay.
Yeah, well, it also... I had to come to grips with the situation that I dropped him in, where he's at, where his son is in prison and he's still at his job. And then he also he didn't grow a lot through his 20s and 30s after a lot of the things that happened to him. The last time he stood up for what he believed in, it didn't go well for him. And I think having gone through that, and then when he came home, his son was gone, he froze emotionally for a long time. And Tosh was an all or nothing kind of guy. So when he froze, he stayed froze for a long time until somebody could kind of get his inertia switched so that he was moving again emotionally. And that someone being Stella. I think that's a non-spoilery answer.
Yeah, they definitely have their romantic tension on like page 1.
Yeah.
No, I definitely, like, once I got farther into his character arc, I caught on and was like, okay, I get it now. Like, I understand. But we don't find all of that out about him right away. So I'm talking like the first couple chapters, like very early on, he's just this, not naive, that's not quite the right word, but
he's willfully naive. Yeah, he's willfully naive.
And I was like, come on.
Being stubborn, and I'll admit that, but that's him.
But then you understand why he was being that way.
Yeah.
And by the time you understand that, he has grown. So it's like, oh, well, okay.
Yeah.
And yeah, that happens really quick, though. In a 700-page book, probably not even a quarter of the way through.
So our next question is from Angela Board. That's at Angela Board. And she was asking if Krystle has learned anything since publishing Brightwash that you wish you knew while you were writing it. And she also wanted everyone to take a quiz to find out which Brightwash character we were.
I forgot to write the quiz down. Okay, so then the hard part of actually, this is the easy part because I actually know what the answer is, but it's another long answer. I wish that I had leaned more into the queer identities of those characters and set them up better, because when I was writing early drafts, I was still in that in the rut of thinking, if I want this book to be popular, I can't make them the way I want them to be. I got to stick to like mainstream guidelines. And for whatever reason, one of the guidelines I thought was, limit the queer characters because people don't want to read about that. And Jason is very stubborn and would not let me take Lauren away from him. So him and Lauren were together through the whole journey of that book. But I tried really hard to make Toshua straight because he was supposed to be the hero and he was supposed to fit in certain boxes. And so him being bisexual didn't actually come into the canon until one of the very last drafts. And I wish that I had spent a little bit more time with that idea, or I wish that I had decided sooner that that's how I was going to do it, because I would have set things up a little bit differently. But I think the core story of Toshua and Stella would have been unchanged even if I had set up Toshua and Ishmael better. But there was just a moment right before I published it where I was like, man, if I don't do this now and I build my career off of this and I can't do it because I flinch now, I'm going to regret it for the rest of my writing career. So I just did it. And sometimes it feels like I should have just done it sooner. I wish I'd known how supportive people were going to be sooner, because people have been amazing about it. So that's the one thing I wish I would know. And the one thing that I would tell anyone thinking of writing their heart and soul into a book is that this community is incredibly supportive, and you will find an amazing audience if you're emotionally honest with your characters. So just go for it. It's scary, but go for it. So that's what I wish I'd done differently. But I think I can fix it in later books.
And I mean, better late than never, right?
Yeah.
Like it still made it into the book, which is fantastic and adds just a wonderful layer to their characters and their relationship.
Yeah, I am glad that I made the decision, even though it was last minute, but that's kind of me. I hem and haw about things for a really long time, but then when I'm on a deadline, it's like, no, okay, I got to do it. So that's pretty well what happened.
Speaking of changes from the first draft to the final version, our next question is from Dan at Dan Fitz Writes. And he was wondering how much more or less steamy is the final version than the earlier drafts? And are there reams of fanfic-like material out there, or did it heat up along the way?
So yeah, it's the second one where it heated up along the way, where earlier versions were, if there were a sex scene, they were quite brief and a lot of euphemisms and fade to black and, close the door. Again, because I had it in my head that it's like, no, that's not how people are writing. That's not what people want to read. But then I was trying to plan out Brick and Bone, and Ishmael had this amazing chemistry with another character who doesn't exist in Brick and Bone anymore, but she did her work by kind of liberating me from my preconceived notions of what I was going to write. And I was writing a sex scene for them, and it was quite long and quite detailed. And I was like, I can't publish this. Well, it's fun anyway, so I'll just finish writing it and then I'll trim it later. And then as I was getting through it, I got really mad at myself for thinking that, because there's quite a lot of violence in Brightwash where someone has both of their shoulders broken. And I never thought, oh, gee, I can't publish this. This is too shocking at describing someone's shoulder joints popping out. But consensual sex with adults, that made me flinch. So I got really stubborn about it. And I went back to Brightwash and made it a lot steamier, because I was mad at all of the programming that I had in my head about what I could and couldn't write and what people did and didn't want to read. So yeah, it's much more steamy now. The only fanfic material out there for Brightwash is a scene with Toshua and Ishmael at the Imberley factory, where I was like, they have so much chemistry and it sucks that I can't write about it. So what I'll do is I'll write this fanfic about this, what happens after the event at the Imberley factory. And I was writing it and I was looking at it and I was like, I can't just throw this away. Like I said, I can't build my career on this straight character and write fanfic about it in my own head canon. Like, this is insane. So I took the conversation out of that sex scene and put it into Just a Kiss, and now it's canon that Tashway and Ishmael used to screw around a lot. But now it's there and I can do something with it. So that's the only fanfic for the Brightwash, is that one sex scene. But there's going to be better stuff later, so.
You laid the foundation.
No regrets. Yeah. And then I can go backwards, I can go forwards, I can do all kinds of stuff with it now, so.
This is a dumb comment, but all of these shorthand for this book, calling it Brightwash, is the name of the river in the city. And so now every time someone asks about something in Brightwash, I am just imagining just like the concept of queerness in a little crate floating down the Brightwash.
It came down from the mountains and somebody pulled it out at Cattlebone Bay, and now it's everywhere in the city. I really like that. I never thought of it that way, and I really like that.
Queerness in Brightwash? Oh yeah. The river's drenched in it.
Yeah. Trail of the city, it is.
Krystle, you have a question here for us, which, by the way, is not how interviews work, but we'll allow it this once.
Sarah said I'm the secret third host, so that means I get to ask questions. This is Sarah's fault. I guess it's not a secret though if I say it on record. Logan.
And I mean, I'm pretty sure that Lily already called you our third host earlier in this episode.
Oh yeah, there you go. So I will ask you a question.
But you have to answer it too.
Well, okay. If you could have a conversation with any one character from Brightwash or Yellsmere, who would it be?
So my answer for this is Vaska, who is the grandson of the sort of head of the organized crime situation in the city this book takes place in. And I wouldn't want to talk to the head guy because I think he would just annoy me. But I think Vaska would know just about as much as him as what's going on and would be a fun conversation.
That's a fair assumption. I can confirm that all of the assumptions that you made.
I think I would like to talk to Ishmael because
if I do air quotes hard enough, will you hear them in the podcast?
I think we could hear them in the sarcasm.
I think so. But I feel like he would have a lot of really interesting stories, and but more than that, I just want to talk about his watchmaking.
That's fair. He would have a lot of interesting stories, but most of them he cannot tell because that is treason. So yeah. I think you mostly talk about watches.
Yeah, I figured...
luckily we aren't real people, so he can tell us anything.
I don't know. I don't think he'd trust that. I bet he's had enough hallucinations in his life that he knows not to blab, even if they're not real.
Damn.
And who would you talk to, Krystle?
Well, I feel like I have conversations with them all the time. So I don't need to choose. Like, I argued with Ishmael for a good long time because I was trying to figure out what his arc was for Brick and Bone, because he takes some POV chapters in Brick and Bone.
Ooh.
And I was arguing with him for a long time about, what does he want and what does he need? And he was insistent that what he needed was, oh, that's a spoiler.
I told you some of these would have spoiler answers.
Well, he got his way. I argued with him for months. And I was like, no, man, you got to let go. You got to move on to this other person. And he's like, no, I'm telling you, trust me. I know what I need. And he's right. So I argued with him a long time. So I'd like to stop arguing with him now. It would be nice if he could cooperate for a little while.
He doesn't seem like the cooperating type.
Only if I'm doing what he wants.
And that's not him cooperating, that's you cooperating.
Yeah, that's me cooperating. That's fair. Yeah, you're right.
So the next question is from Connor. Again, that's at the CM Kaplan. And he asked, if you could pick one sentence in the book as your favorite, which one would it be and why?
Oh, me? Are you guys going to answer these?
All of us. Yeah.
I think all of us, yeah.
I'll start because I have mine picked out already. So this is a conversation between Tashwe and Ishmael. And Ishmael was flippantly referring to Tashwe's romantic interest.
Oh.
And Tashwe takes issue with the fact that he said that she was his romantic interest and says she's not mine and goes off. There's 2 lines that I pulled out. I'm not going to read the whole 2-paragraph conversation, but he tells Tashwe, "You're all self-righteous these days, burning with the fires of some kind of fucking higher understanding. Good for you, but you keep pointing your self-righteousness at me like you still think I'm garbage after all these years." And I mostly appreciated adults calling each other out on their shit instead of just festering about it, because I hate that.
Yeah, Ishmael is not one to sit quietly if he's got a problem with somebody.
The line that I chose is from the end of the book, and Stella and another character, a reporter, are talking about how this reporter has just killed someone, and Stella is saying about how you never really forget how it feels to have someone, a man, trying overpowering you. And she says that change is not something to be ashamed of, and it's not something you should resist. You can't be the same woman you were when you woke up this morning, but it's all right to exist as this new woman, cracked by your rough handling, but still alive. And I just really appreciated her words of it's okay to recognize how awful this experience you've gone through is, but you can come out of it and be okay on the other side.
Yeah. I picked that one too, but I picked a bunch just in case. I don't know if you can see on my bookmarks. I picked that one too. I wanted to say that one made my editor cry, so that's how I knew I was on the good.
It's a good line.
That one was pretty personal. I put bookmarks in, but then now I forget. Oh yeah, I just have a bunch of spots that I really like. I really liked Tashwe and Stella's first kiss on the steps of her building. I enjoyed writing that scene, particularly the spot where he's reflecting on why her.
Oh, I have that. I have a quote from that scene highlighted as well.
Yeah, and he kind of just everything, the sound of her voice and the smell of her hair and the freckles on her cheek. It was that she was so tired but quietly strong, lovely and resolute, turning her face to the sun so she could bloom, and that she knew him better than he knew himself. That was a fun one to write. And that was a last minute, speaking of draft changes, that was a last minute scene. I put that in right before I sent that to my editor. And man, am I glad I did.
I mean, that quote in particular that you pulled is the one that I was thinking of. And it's such a beautiful expression of their burgeoning relationship.
Oh, the other one that I liked was her saying the same thing about him in the middle of, oh, is that a spoiler? Yeah, the market fire. And they see each other across the distance. And she knows it's a little bit insane to be focusing on him when part of the city is burning down. And yet the way he looked at her as if he wasn't surrounded by the fire, and the way her heart beat faster when she looked at him, and that he was the only person in the city that saw her. So that was it was fun to kind of play the two of them off of each other. Okay, I'm going to say one more. Just one more. The other one that I really liked was him Tashwe talking to another character about his son, about how, he feels like he made a lot of mistakes along the way. But I often think that everything I did with Jason was wrong, except my decision to come home to him so that he could raise his son. But then the other character says, and this is kind of me summing up my feelings about parenthood in general, I think that our children grow into their personalities and decisions in spite of our efforts and not because of them.
This next question is completely baffling to me. I don't understand it at all.
So the next question is from Mike Fletcher, at Fletcher MR. Are rumors that there is a dripping bucket tavern in the sequel true?
Okay, so the background on that is that the wonderful and incredibly supportive Michael Fletcher is another indie writer, and he started this trend of naming I think in all of his books, there's a tavern called the Dripping Bucket. And then he wanted it to spread into other people's fantasy books so that anytime you pick up a fantasy book, there's a dripping bucket somewhere, just so it feels like, just a little link between all of our ideas. It was too late to put it in Brightwash, but I was committed to the Pint Under the Rails. But down in Callabone Bay, there is going to be a dripping bucket, but it's a little bit different than Fletcher's dripping buckets. So Lauren hadn't been to the dripping bucket before, but he'd been to other pubs like it in the Bay. Pubs standing in the outer edges of the Bay, closest to Highview and Drystone, were more or less the same. A wild array of alcohol that wasn't typically available in poorer quarters, like single malt whiskeys and aged brandies and vodkas and gins. See, everyone's covered. Rich clientele that wanted to spend the evening with Bay company because they got a thrill out of being around people that were reputed to be hard-worn, a little dangerous, and on the whole, horny. Bay folks filled these pubs to bursting because it was the best way to get alcohol they couldn't afford, and more food they could eat in a week, and a roof and a bed for the night. The risk of meeting someone that liked things too rough far outweighed the potential rewards. So yes, Fletcher, there is a dripping bucket. But as per kind of my brand, my dripping bucket is horny.
That checks out.
Yeah. It fits.
So I don't think that we have any more questions from Twitter, but I have a question that I was thinking about as we read this, and it's not something necessarily that I picked up on the first read, but I was able to focus more when I was reading it for the second time, and that's you drop a lot of really intriguing hints about Bronwyn or the North Star and like the founding of Dominion and its history. And like, I want her story. Are we going to get that?
Yeah, so all of my answers are going to be long. I stepped away from fantasy for a long time after David Gemmell died, just because at the time, I guess I just needed time to mourn because he was such a foundational part of my reading as a young person. So when he died, no other writers that were available at the time seemed to fill his specific shoes. So I stopped writing fantasy and went to thrillers and mysteries and historical fiction. So I was away for a long time. And in those stories, I was writing about Toshaway, and he was often a cop, which is part of why he starts as a cop in Brightwash. It was kind of the blending of our history coming into the fantasy world. But so all that being said, I spent a lot of time away. And then at some point, I just started feeling like I needed to come back. Like I needed to come home to fantasy. And the story of the North Star was my first attempt. So that's Logan and Bronwyn's story. And it was kind of my take on the rise of the farm boy trope and the chosen one and all that. But the twist was that it was not the boy, it was the girl that he was following around that was actually the chosen one. So I put a lot of time into that story, but at the time I didn't have a lot of, friends in the community, or actually I didn't have any. I had my husband, he's great, but I just didn't have the resources of other writers. So whenever I got stuck, I just thought, I gotta start over. And eventually I burnt myself out. But all of that is there and it's ripe for the picking. And then so I missed Toshaway and I wanted to bring him into this world. So he jumped into fantasy for me. But I wanted to give that idea time. And I think I will go back to it eventually. There's also somebody right before him, or right before Bronwyn, about 50 or 100 years before Bronwyn, named Blaylock. I think I'm going to do his story first because he was another character that was queer in my headcanon but straight on the page. And now that I'm brave, I'd like to go back and tell his story properly. So that would be a medieval period. So it would be him and Rawl, and then I would probably do the North Star, but I have so many ideas. I can't guarantee when, but it's there and it's written into the history. So it's one day.
Well, that makes me happy because I really want to read her story. Like just the little bits that we get as setting in Brightwash just really intrigued me.
That's really nice. No, I'm going to run out of going to run out of answers, but it's nice to know that all of that extra thinking has made an impression.
And for context, Bronwyn is a deified folk hero. Okay.
Yes. I'm really bad at remembering that there are people in the world that don't know what I'm talking about.
That's why we're here.
I think that's what we have Lily for.
After this, there won't be.
Before we get to the really hard-hitting interview questions, as I think we've kind of all intimated by the fact that we're all drinking whiskey specifically because we're talking about Brightwash.
We're drinking whiskey because we all like whiskey.
Yeah.
We're using Brightwash as an excuse.
I think it's a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B, right? Like,
yeah, it's the excuse. But sometimes you guys drink cider or wine or whatever. So like we themed, but we themed with things that we like.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so there's a lot of whiskey in this book, and you actually have your own hashtag Brightwash and booze. And so my question is, were you a whiskey drinker before writing Brightwash? And if not, like, what led you to include it, and how much research did you have to do?
I was a whiskey drinker by the time I was reading Brightwash, but it's Toshua that got me onto whiskey. Back in the day when he was in our contemporary world, I was trying to figure out what he would drink, and he just said, I drink whiskey. So I needed to figure out what all this whiskey stuff was like. So I started drinking it, and I could not handle it at first. So I was drinking whiskey cocktails, but I worked my way up. I worked my way up from a whiskey sour to just whiskey straight. And then when I went on my first date with the man who is now my husband, I ordered a whiskey, and he was really impressed. So he asked for a second date. So Toshua is a really good wingman and also helped broaden my palate.
So then the next thing is another less of a question and more of a comment, but I really like how much range and complexity the women in Brightwash have.
Yeah.
They feel like they are allowed to be three-dimensional in a way that characters often, that female characters specifically often aren't in fantasy. So that was a breath of fresh air, really.
I was laying down the gauntlet, and I was daring people to comment on her behavior because, as far as I'm concerned, she's a lot less outrageous than some male heroes in fantasy, you know, with their sexual antics. And I was like, I'm not going to measure her by some false metric of femininity. She's just going to be whoever the fuck she is. And I'm really delighted with the way people have responded to her. People really like her, and it's a lot of fun.
She's wonderful. She gives me villain vibes, not because she sleeps with people, but like
I disagree.
Yeah.
You disagree?
That she gives villain vibes.
About the villain vibes?
Yeah. That's all I disagree with.
You should be giving villain vibes.
Okay. So we know that there's a conspiracy with dead children, and I'm not going to say anything beyond that.
Yeah, okay. I should clarify. She's not involved in that.
Okay. That was my line. I was like, if she does know, then yeah, obviously she's on the bad side.
No, see, I think her political maneuvering is what gives her the villain vibes. Like, I don't trust her in that regard.
This is spoilers. We got to stop, you guys. This is why I left my Ilya comment for the spoiler section.
Okay, so we'll circle back to her then.
This question wasn't specifically, or this comment wasn't specifically about her.
Yeah, so I can talk about Stella and Kaz instead.
Okay.
Yeah, like all of the women in Brightwash are very nuanced and multidimensional, and I just really appreciate that.
I'm looking forward to bringing the more. So Mallory Imberly is going to have a pretty big role in the next chunk of the story. So I'm excited to have her kind of come into the spotlight a little bit, and then Kaz gets a much bigger part. Yeah, I can't say anything about her bigger part, but yeah.
I love Kaz, and I'm really excited that we get to see more of her. And deviating a little bit away from Brightwash just a little, when I was reading the Lee Bardugo Shadow and Bone books, there's a character in Six of Crows named Kaz, and I was just like, no, Kaz is a woman.
Oh, is it a male character?
Yeah, it's a male character. He's a male character, but I had read Brightwash first, and I was like, no, Kaz is a woman.
Yes, Kaz is a very small and very feisty woman.
I also loved Kaz. I'm glad to hear that Imberly is going to be seen a little bit more in the next book, because my biggest comment about her was, huh? And what?
Oh, yeah, just because she's only in a couple scenes, eh?
Yeah, we don't see her very much. And I could not really catch on to what her deal was. Probably because she wasn't on screen very much. So I'm excited to find that out.
Do you mean why she's so bitchy with Ishmael?
But she wasn't always. And I was like, what is going on? Is she like an understanding, down-to-earth person? Or is she a out-of-touch rich person? Cannot tell. She kind of goes back and forth. Excited to find out what's going on there. Don't say it. I can tell by your face you're dying.
I refuse to comment on the grounds that I might incriminate myself. But yeah, there's going to be more from her.
My headcanon is that Ishmael bothers her because he reminds her of her brother, who she clearly has some tension with. But it could also be more complicated than that. I guess I'll find out. Oh,
it's
listeners.
a little more complicated than that.
Listeners, Krystle is making the best faces at us right now.
Krystle is making some faces.
It's a little bit more complicated than that. Yes.
Guess I better read the next one.
Before we move on to anything else, you mentioned the story Tainted.
Yeah.
Which I would like to say thank you for not using the word taint in this book.
No. And for the longest time, the story Tainted was called Taint. And my friends, Clayton, did not tell me. And he was going to let me hang my whole ass out in front of people. And then Angela read
Excuse me, your whole taint.
I was going to say.
Angela read a really spicy romance novel, and then she said, Krystle, you got to change this. I can't name this. So thank you, Angela, and thanks for nothing, Clayton.
But my point was, it sounded like this short story is available and out, and where can we find it if we want to read it?
Okay, so that one is in the anthology called Dark Ends that we put together. Luke Tarzian invited me on that project. Oh God, that was a couple of years ago now. So I wrote that, and so it bridges. It's from Glen's point of view, so it starts at the same spot as Brightwash, but it continues on beyond Brightwash, and you're not gonna like me for how it ends, Sarah.
I'm sure that I won't. But that means that I have to.
I mean, we know what happens to that character, so.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm sure that I'm going to be very unhappy when I read that.
There's
story.
More. It gets worse.
Oh, joy!
Poor
joy.
baby.
So yeah, the how that ends locked me in on something that happens to Toshaway, and that really messed me up for a long time. But I've got it now.
Oh no!
I've got it now.
Oh no.
What's the matter, Sarah?
I am very worried. If I was tweeting this, it would be I am capital V very, capital W worried. I'm very worried.
Toshaway survives.
That's not really reassuring me that much, Krystle.
Why not?
I mean, I guess it reassures me a little bit, but it doesn't reassure me as much as I need reassuring. That's for sure.
It can't be that much of a spoiler. Like, do I really seem like the kind of person that can kill my main character?
No, which is why saying that Toshaway survives isn't
not helpful.
Yeah, that's not helpful.
I'm right. Okay.
Thank you for listening to part 1 of our interview with Krystle Matar, author of Legacy of the Brightwash. Keep an eye out for part 2, coming soon.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Fiction Fans.
Come disagree with us. We're on Twitter and Instagram @FictionFansPod. You can also email us at fictionfanspod@gmail.com.
If you enjoyed the episode, please rate and review on Apple Podcasts and follow us wherever your podcasts live.
Thanks again for listening, and may your villains always be defeated. Bye.
Bye.